Ever looked at, say, a simple piece of colored rock, maybe some ochre, and thought it was just, well, ancient paint? For a long time, that's pretty much how we saw it in early human history. But today, we're diving into a discovery that might just fundamentally reshape how we view our ancient ancestors.
Absolutely.
It reveals, these sophisticated minds and skills much, much earlier than we maybe gave them credit for.
That's right. Ochre. That iron-rich pigment you find scattered around archaeological sites, it's traditionally been tied to symbolic uses. Think body paint, cave art, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But its practical uses, especially back in the Middle Stone Age, those have been largely overlooked or maybe misunderstood. The functional side just wasn't the focus.
Well, buckle up because that perspective is definitely shifting. We're looking at a really groundbreaking study today from Sapiens, published in Science Advances. It's bringing out some startling evidence from Blombos Cave down in South Africa. So our mission in this deep dive, it's really to unpack how this discovery completely changes the game for ochre.
Yeah, redefining its role.
Exactly. And shedding new light on just how advanced the technical skills and behaviors of early modern humans were. Get ready, because this is where it gets really interesting.
It really does.
So let's start there. Ochre equals art or ritual. That was the main idea. What was the first hint, the spark that suggested, hey, wait a minute, maybe there's something else going on?
Well, it really started in the Sapiens lab in Cape Town. A researcher, Elizabeth Felecki, was meticulously looking over artifacts from earlier digs at Blombos Cave.
Okay.
And one particular piece of ochre just caught her eye. It had a really unique shape and, more importantly, very specific wear patterns. The marks left from how humans used it.
Uh-huh.
And these marks just screamed, not pigment. It suggested something well specialized.
And this wasn't just a fluke, a one-off weird piece. Did they find more like it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That was the crucial next step. After that initial find, Felicki and her colleagues, Francesco Dorico, Karen Van Eycker, Christopher Henshelwood, they started actively looking for and finding more ochre pieces showing these same distinctive features.
Oh,
It quickly became clear they weren't just oddities, they were looking at basically a whole new type of artifact, something people had maybe speculated about but hadn't really pinned down before.
So once they realized, okay, these are different, they're consistent, what was the next step? How did they figure out what these pieces were actually for? What was their function?
Right. So the team zeroed in on 7 specific ochre pieces. They came from sediment layers in Blombos Cave, dated to roughly 90,000 to 70,000 years ago. Pretty specific window.
Okay.
And through really detailed analysis, looking at the wear under microscopes, and also doing experimental replications, trying to recreate the marks themselves, they confirmed these ochre pieces were retouchers. Yeah, basically tools used in the process of making other tools. Stone tools, specifically. It's part of what we call lithic retouching.
Okay, lithic retouching. Now, for listeners, that might just sound like sharpening rocks, but it's more complex than that, right? What does that really involve?
It's definitely more precise than just rough sharpening. Lithic retouching is about carefully modifying stone tools, refining their edges, shaping them for specific tasks. And the wear patterns on these ochre retouchers, they matched marks made by both direct hitting, percussion, but also, really significantly, by pressure flaking.
Pressure flaking. Now that sounds like something demanding. Why is that technique such a big deal? What does it tell us about the people doing it?
It's a huge deal. Pressure flaking is, well, it's tough. It requires incredible fine motor control, a lot of planning, and expert knowledge of the stone. You're delicately removing tiny, precise flakes. It's absolutely vital if you want to produce really highly refined, super effective tools. Think about the famous still bay points found at Blombos too, these beautiful, symmetrical, bifacial tools.
Yeah, I've seen pictures. They're incredible.
Exactly. They show really advanced flaking, and pressure flaking was likely instrumental in making them. It points to advanced hunting strategies, planning, real sophistication.
So we're definitely not talking about someone just grabbing a handy rock off the ground. These ochre pieces were deliberately shaped, maybe even curated, for this very specific, very demanding job.
Precisely. Felicki herself noted, we now know that these ochre pieces were not simply picked up and used. They were carefully modified to serve a specific technological purpose. That sums it up perfectly.
Wow.
And there's more. The evidence also showed signs of pecking tiny impact marks. Maybe that was to help shape the ochre tool itself, or maybe even to roughen it up for a better grip.
Huh.
And get this, signs of rejuvenation. meaning they were sharpening or reshaping the ochre retoucher itself as it wore down. They were maintaining these tools, investing time in them, long-term use.
Okay, that level of care, the intentional shaping, the maintenance, what does that suggest about the people behind the tools? What does it tell us about their culture, maybe even their way of thinking?
Well, the standardization, the fact that they were making them in similar ways, and the clear intentionality, it strongly suggests these weren't just casual throwaway tools.
Right.
They were likely personal items, maybe, treasured tools belonging to really skilled flint knappers.
Right.
Francesco de Rico actually suggested they might have functioned not just as practical tools, but maybe also as indicators of identity. Like, I'm a master tool maker. Look at my specialized ochre retoucher.
So a badge of skill almost?
Kind of, or at least reflecting technical prowess. And this really challenges that old view of ochre being only symbolic, It shows it was deeply embedded in their technology, their daily life, maybe even tied into how they saw themselves or their group.
So if they're showing this kind of abstract planning, this skilled craftsmanship, using ochre this way 90,000 years ago, what does that fundamentally challenge about how we usually think about early human cognitive abilities?
It pushes things back significantly. It really deepens our understanding of what we call behavioral modernity in early Homo sapiens, particularly in southern Africa.
Behavioral modernity, meaning complex thought, symbolism, advanced tools.
Exactly. That whole suite of behaviors. For a long time, that kind of really precise planning, the tool refinement we see here, especially pressure flaking, that was often thought to be more characteristic of, say, the Upper Paleolithic in Europe much later.
Right, maybe 40,000 years ago or so?
Or maybe the very late Middle Stone Age in Africa. But this discovery pushes that kind of cognitive ability, that technical know-how, way back. We're talking tens of thousands of years earlier in Africa.
Wow.
These artifacts clearly show an ability to have a preconceived geometric form in mind and then execute it precisely. Through pecking, grinding, scraping. Take one specific example, the barrel-shaped retoucher, CHCI .154. The maker clearly knew the exact size and shape needed for pressure flaking. That points to highly specialized knowledge, a cognitive ability we maybe hadn't fully attributed to the pre-Still Bay period before.
And that specific shape, you don't see that elsewhere.
Yes, specific barrel shape made with those techniques. It's pretty much unique for that time period in Africa or Europe before the European Upper Paleolithic. The only vague parallels might be some much later Neolithic stone beads from Levant. It's really distinct.
That level of foresight and precision so early, it's truly stunning. It's clearly not just about making slightly better spear points, is it? It hints at something deeper, sophisticated thinking, maybe passing knowledge down.
Precisely. It highlights this really complex interplay between what we might separate as symbolic and functional. There weren't necessarily separate categories for them. It suggests a deep understanding, a comprehension of specific outcomes needed to create these tools. And yes, these skills, these techniques, they weren't invented on the spot. They had to be learned, mastered over time, and then passed down through generations.
So a tradition.
A rich tradition, yeah. Specialized craftsmanship, and maybe even, early concepts of personal property or valued tools. And it's really important context here to remember Blombos Cave itself. It's just this incredible reservoir of evidence for Middle Stone Age cultural innovation. We're talking a long period, roughly 100,000 down to about 72,000 years ago.
Yeah, Blombos keeps popping up, doesn't it? It seems like every few years there's another amazing discovery from that site, pushing back timelines.
It really does. I mean, Blombos has given us engraved ochre pieces with complex geometric designs, maybe the earliest abstract art.
Right, the cross-hatching.
Exactly. And the earliest known deliberate drawing. Also those nefarious shell beads, clearly ornaments. Some even had ochre traces on them, suggesting they were colored or worn against ochred skin.
Wow.
Plus modified bone tools, evidence they were heat-treating silkrete rock to make it better for tool making. Even a whole ochre processing workshop kit found in an abalone shell, dated to 100,000 years ago.
So finding these ochre retouchers there, it just fits perfectly into this picture of Blombos being a real hub of, sophisticated behavior and innovation. It adds another dimension to how central ochre was.
Exactly right. And significantly, more than half of these newly identified retouchers came from the M3 layers at Blombos.
And M3 is?
Those are already known as the most ochre-rich layers in the whole cave sequence. So it just beautifully underlines how ochre was simultaneously functional and symbolic for these communities. It was enriching their lives in all sorts of profound ways.
What an incredible deep dive. It really is remarkable, isn't it? To think that a piece of ochre, something we might have just casually dismissed as ancient paint, can tell us so much. about the advanced minds, the complex daily lives of our early human ancestors. They weren't just getting by, they were truly innovating, specializing, maybe even expressing identity through the tools they made.
It really hammers home that point, doesn't it? That knowledge isn't just having information, it's understanding it and applying it.
Yeah.
And this discovery forces us to rethink how integrated things like art and technology really were back then.
Yeah, we tend to put them in separate boxes now.
Exactly. But maybe they weren't separate at all.
Huh?
And it just dramatically pushes back the timeline for these complex cognitive patterns, this specialized craftsmanship. It demands a recalibration.
And you mentioned this is likely just scratching the surface. The researchers hope this sparks more discussion, right? Looking for this kind of ochre use elsewhere.
Absolutely. The hope is this study really fuels new conversations about just how multifunctional ochre was and how deeply it was woven into both the symbolic and the technological lives of early modern humans, not just at Blombos, but potentially across many other sites too.
Yeah.
And maybe think about this for a moment. Consider the objects you use every day. Most are functional, sure, but some might have a little modification you made or a specific story attached, right? Something that makes it personal or reflects a skill you have.
Yeah, good point.
How might archaeologists thousands of years from now interpret your treasured implements? What clues might they hold about your identity, your skills, or just the subtle, everyday complexities of our culture today? Makes you think, doesn't it?